It's 11 minutes past 11 Central Africa time. This is still On the Move with myself, Palesa and Benjamin Moshatama. We're going into our parenting and family corner here on the Move. And this is an amazing, feature where we get to speak about the experiences of family, the experiences of parenthood, and really the experiences of being African within those contexts. And today we're speaking about family conflict resolution. And usually when we think about conflict resolution, we think only about the people within that conflict who have the opportunity to resolve it. So even within family setting, we have these modern thought processes that say, what happens in the family must stay in the family, and then we have to resolve the conflict within the family. But long before Africa was colonized and way beyond the advent of the slave trade, African societies had their own mechanisms as well as cultural sources to uphold the values of peace, of tolerance, of solidarity and respect for one another that involved more than just the family setting, but the community at large. So we're taking a look at some of these age-old practices of conflict resolution within African families that involved the community, that involved community leaders, but also had a sense of being accountable with one another and for one another. We're having this conversation this morning with Professor Pitika Ntuli. He's a poet, writer, academic, and cultural expert who wears many hats and is helping us unpack this morning. Thank you so much for your time, Professor Ntuli. And I heard you have this incredible poem for us before we go into this conversation. We really appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you very much, and also to the listeners and viewers. You have articulated where we're actually coming from, but I would like to put up the basis for it. We are not what we think we are. We have become clones of our colonial masters. In the aftermath of empire's shadows linger, echoes of the past still whisper in the wind, where the parasite cloaked in continues to thrive, drawing life from the veins of our land. Promises were tipped in gold, but the weight of chains remains an invisible grip tied in our throats. Words stammer and crumble as resources bleed into foreign hands. Our wealth siphoned while we toil in fields once ours, now overlaid with foreign dreams. Cultural tapestries fraying, colors dulled by dust of neglect. Our stories rewritten with ghost words, lost in the cacophony of imposed tongues, the rhythm of our heritage drowned by the drum beats of conquest. In the corridors of power, the puppet strings pull tight as the puppet masters, distant yet close, dictate the dance of our destinies. Politics as masquerade, where sovereignty wears a borrowed mask, and freedom is a spectre flickering beyond reach. Yet within the cracks of despair, where hope fights to breathe, a fire ignites, the pulse of resistance throbbing as we gather our voices, a chorus rising from the ashes, our narrative reclaiming the air, threads of resilience weave the tapestries of hope. I thought it's very important that we say that as we look at the issue of conflict and conflict resolution within our families.
Oh, that is incredible. And thank you so much for reciting that incredible poem. It's titled Coloniality, the Parasite Within. And it's a great way to start this conversation because what family is in today's reality is actually not what, as culturally or traditionally we viewed family to be within the African context. So let's start there. In fact, before we speak about the conflict resolution, let's take a look at how the concept of family has changed within our African borders. Professor, are you there?
Yes, me.
Yes, now, just help us unpack, this concept of family.
Yes. Let's first, we have already agreed that colonialism has reordered us. And now the concept of family is that a family, it's where, people that share a lineage, live. And they are not just one household, but it is an extension that moves over into a clan. so that if any dispute arises, which is a very powerful, even political one, then a number of other key people who are versed in these things are actually brought in. But I would like to bring up now as to where our problem manifested itself more. The contract labor system, what it did, it took men from their villages to come and work in the mines, to be humiliated by people younger than theirs, and getting them angry to a point that when some of them go back, the family relations are no longer the same as it used to be. So that kind of a disruption redefined what we know as a family. A father is far away, the children are somewhere else, forced, by commercial reasons. But we need actually to first ground this thing in proper African indigenous knowledge systems. When a child is born, an umbilical cord is buried in order to link it to the environment, so that environment becomes actually part of it. Everything that we do is almost scientifically laid down. How do we do it? If I quarrel with my wife and we cannot resolve that matter, and she tells her family what has really happened, what happens then? I do not, as a father of the guy who has abused my makoti, get involved in these things. We go back to Abakongi. Abakongi, the negotiators, when you pay lobola, arranging how these families are going to link with each other, how they would solve their problems, with each other, becomes absolutely a very pertinent thing to do.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about that, because that administration or that family council is selected in a very particular way. It's not just a vestige of trust, but it's also based on our lineage, but also both families represented. Could you speak a little bit about those family councils that were involved in this conflict resolution mediation?
Yeah. So what happens is that, if my son going around and gets struck by a beautiful Palesa on the road and then comes back to me and said, I have seen a very beautiful bird flying and singing poetry, and I want it to be a permanent member of my life. I said, my child, don't get me involved in this, because that will involve quarrels. So what we are going to do, we are then going to get Abakongi, the people who will represent us as a family, who will tell those people as to where their daughter is coming into, what kind of a family we are. And on the other hand, the family of Palesa will also get their own negotiators, so that the discussions come. So that if anything goes wrong and my son misbehaves, they will say, when we're negotiating, you promised this and this and this, you said your family did this, but here you are now, coming up and doing the things that you are really doing. So it becomes much more of a serious. And then discussions, therefore, as to how do we then move forward. And when my son gets home, then we've got to start another conflict that we have to resolve, because he has put us into conflict with the people of which we have built this relationship.
I love the example that you're using, Professor, because it speaks about the strong sense of accountability in Africa's traditional ways, and accountability that we seem to have lost when we've cut down what the meaning of family is and only narrowed it down to our immediate lineage, not being accountable to the other members of our clans, and also not being accountable to the members of our community as one whole rather than as individuals within a societal setup. So let's take a break. I want us to speak a little bit more about that accountability factor of conflict resolution within our traditional African methods, but also how we can continue to implement those methods into our modern life practices. We're speaking to Professor Pitika Ntuli, who wears many hats as a poet, a writer, an academic and cultural expert, speaking about age-old practices of conflict resolution within African families.
Get set and be ready to go. On the Move with Palesa and Benjamin Moshatama.
Hey, how do we solve our problems in our families, in our communities? Where do we actually go to resolve things from a communal perspective? We're speaking to Professor Pitika Ntuli, poet, writer, dreamer, academic, cultural expert, and also an anti-apartheid protester. Such an important person to actually be speaking to today around this one. Professor, let's speak a little bit about that, because from a communal perspective, it seems like the nucleus is a little bit broken up, because as you spoke about in internal family migrations that have created a collapse of this structure, and in today's life, we find hard to reclaim that particular nucleus. So today, let's talk a little bit about that particular counsel in families. Can it extend outside of our families into our communities? Do we still have space for healers? Do we have space for traditional medicines? Do we still have space for elders and councils within the even monarch structures to actually be part of conflict management in our communities?
But what we should actually remember is that we were colonized, and that coloniality did not extend very much to the deepest villages, where the people that are not educated, as you said, there are people who still hold on to, the value systems that are very important for keeping the social well-being of a community. That is why then it becomes, therefore, so crucial and critical that our own education system, that is really letting us down. Our cultures are not taught in there. Our young people do not know. Some of them that are now old, in their 50s and their 60s, have already been alienated. We have been actually eroded. But then there are still people in various kind of communities and individuals who are still championing, this. But the tragedy that we are facing is that we have come up with brilliant ideas, like, for instance, the Commission for Cultural, Religious, and Linguistic things, protecting those cultures. Those are the instruments that we should be using in looking at these issues. But lo and behold, when we have got these structures in here, they are peopled by deployees who have already lost their own culture and absolutely lost. That places us then into conflicts even within our own selves, when we begin to think about how our dreams and our ancestral beliefs are being betrayed.
Mm-hmm. So how do we get that back, that council, that family council, especially in our urban areas? Do we revisit where we come from? Maybe we need to trace our rural destinations of our pasts, or maybe do we just start from where we are and try to reassemble that elderly council?
Once you assemble that elderly council without going back to where it actually started, then there's going to be a problem. So the links with the source, where you are. In Nguni culture, we have got what we call umsamo. Umsamo is a shrine.
Sure.
In each and every family, so that when the conflict starts, we have to consult with the ancestors. The ancestors are not just words; they are the knowledges that we have been brought up with to know who you are, why you are, and where you are going, and how we have to relate, to each other. So, if we are cut off from your past, then it becomes very important that you link with your friends and your neighbors that are still connected, so that you become part of the rebuilding in our townships and in our suburbs, what it really means to be an African, what it really means to open your ear and your hearts, honestly, to bring about peace in the spirit of Ubuntu.
And who's responsible for this process? I feel at times when we speak to the elders, especially let's speak from a contemporary setup, Professor, it seems like there's no willingness there because they've also lost track of their family trees. And then at times we feel like, also like you're mentioning, in our formal structures of governance in many African countries, it seems like there are deployees who are not well versed in things of the spirit or things of the traditional modes. And we left also with more questions. Who initiates this process of re-establishing these conflict resolution councils?
I think in some many cases, it is individuals who are concerned. I will cite one example. There is Asante Wangiti in KwaZulu, in Natal, who spends every day with almost about 30 young people, teaching them our culture and how to do things. In our art studios, we hold workshops with traditional, leaders and spiritual, healers, addressing these issues as to what is the role of traditional, healers within those communities, in also helping to re-establish the broken lines caused by colonialism. So that in other words, we do not say it should be just government or a province or institutions. We have, if we are concerned, even as individuals, with the skills that we actually have, spread those skills, just like you are doing, right now, contributing and awakening the sleeping minds on the need for negotiations, for need for peace, and the need never, ever to forget who you really are, where your umbilical cord is buried in the African soil.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have to wrap it up there. Thank you so much for your comprehensive understanding on this one. And I love the fact that you didn't just pinpoint one culture or just a few cultures, but there's an overarching theme that kind of looks at the general aspect from a continental perspective. Thank you for giving us your time.
But before you even close,
sure.
A powerful book by Sheikh Anta Diop about the cultural unity of Africa. That must be recommended everywhere to see that we are one people. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Professor, for that recommendation as we wrap up this conversation. That's Professor Pitika Ntuli, poet, writer, academic, and cultural expert. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think we can still get our elders in? Put them in one room and say, let's talk, let's find out about who we are, let's solve the problems within our family dynamics? Or do you think it's hard to trace our history? It's difficult to actually find those elders. What is your take on this one? +2763 406 9126. It's 11:30 Central African time. It's time for us to wrap our morning sports. Let's find out what the news team has for us.